Few weeks ago I became a father, and as I'm caring for this little tiny, fragile, helpless creature, my darling angel, I began to wonder about life. Because this tiny, super cute Princess Poopy Pants, as we've all been, who only started as a single cell, has the potential in her to become the master of the world and cosmos. Well, at least her world and her own cosmos. But humans are only one piece of the puzzle. The world we live in is teeming with something that we refer to as life. Animals, plants, insects, cells, bacteria, computer programs. What defines as life? Where did life come from? And why you should care? Let's dive in. Let's start with the definition, shall we? Can you, dear viewer, define what life is? Please do share down in the comments below. I would love to hear your definitions of life. If I would have to define it off the top of my head without doing any research, I would say life is being aware of your internal world and your external world, and feeling the freedom of using humans' imaginations. Of course, this doesn't correlate very well with other life forms on the planet, and I kind of believe in the mystical, magical, esoteric nonsense as well, just, because it makes life more interesting. But as a child, I remember becoming aware of death. And death to me was a picture of me lying in a deep dark ground without being able to move and being very still forever and ever and ever, with my parents not being around me. Just like a child feels, I guess, when she is trying to sleep throughout the night. So death, I suppose, is the opposite of life. Not being alive, a non-life. Your fork is not alive, your TV is not alive, your cat is alive and your plant is alive, but your carpet is not alive. Well, there's life inside the carpet, but science has not yet found an exact set of criteria that precisely classifies and separates life from non-life, but there is a basic list that can categorize similar properties. Let's dive in. In the science of biology, I found 7 properties that should clarify what defines of being alive.
Organization. Living things contain well-organized parts that work together as a system, like cells for instance. There are unicellular organisms that are quite complex, made of atoms which make up molecules, molecules make up organelles and other structures. Then there are multicellular organisms, where cells form tissues which create organs, heart and lungs for example, and organs work together to form organ systems. Living systems also use metabolism, meaning chemical reactions in the organism where stuff gets broken down to release energy and then to use that energy to build more complex stuff. Homeostasis is where the organism maintains a certain level needed for it to survive, like a pH level or calcium levels, or maintaining our inner environment temperature despite the changing external environment. Growth. Individual cells can become larger, or as in case of humans, we just make more cells through cell division, thanks to anabolic metabolism. You started out as a single cell and now you have trillions in your body. Then there's reproduction. All life should be able to reproduce, whether it's asexual, meaning it just takes a single parent to reproduce without the need of a fertilization. Examples are bacteria, worker bees, hammerhead, shark, onions, garlics, so grow them away. Or sexual, and we all know what that means. Take your mama, take your papa, sperm and egg, and you won the lottery, where the odds were 300 million to 1. Congratulations! There's also a thing called response. There are things we like and things we don't like. Something gets too hot, we take our hand away. Something is nice, we turn towards it. Or unicellular organisms migrate away from toxic environment towards more nurturing and nutrients-filled one. Living things demonstrate irritability. And then last but not least, evolution. Life adapts to the environment, or dies off, or finds a new place. If there was a bird living in a rocky area where the food wiggles in tight crevices, and one bird maybe had a slimmer beak than the rest, thus being able to catch the food, who would still be in the area thousands of years later? Over generations we can then pass on these traits to our offspring, which then they can use to their advantage while living in their environments.
Now, looking at this list, we could conclude that life is an entity with the ability to adapt to its environment and reproduce. Yet this is not a definitive list. What about consciousness? What about self-awareness? What about critical thinking? What about all the other organisms that cannot self-replicate? Like mules or hinnies, which are the hybrids of horses and donkeys. And what about viruses? Still very relevant to the topic. Tiny protein and nucleic acid structure that can only reproduce inside a host cell. They have many of the properties of life, but they don't have cellular structure and they cannot reproduce. It's not clear if they maintain homeostasis and they don't carry out their own metabolism. And because of that, they are not generally considered to be alive, but they definitely replicate and adapt to their environment. So in that regards, they are more like androids than living organisms. And speaking of droids and robots, picture a smart robot like R2-D2 from Star Wars, or Sonny from iRobot, or those robots in Westworld, or Terminator, or Transformers, or any 100 other robots that the human mind has conceived to show that the life is just more complex than some basic list of properties. This robot would show organizations. That means that, well, maybe not cells, but they have mechanical parts. It could respond to stimuli and even have metabolism, where energy in it can power the circuitry to make complex things happen. It could even maintain homeostasis, where internal cooling or heating systems could hold the system stable if the external environment changes. Yes, the robot would not grow or reproduce, but it could be programmed as such. Imagine programming a robot to add more pieces to itself or make replications of itself, with each variant being slightly different, like DNA evolving. Well, if it talks like us and walks like us, could then the robot not be alive then? Now, some things can behave lifelike, but they are not. Crystals...
They're rocks, Hank!
No, they're minerals! Jesus, Maria!
...can grow and be organized, but they are not alive. Fire can grow and use homeostasis, but it's not alive. Wood inside our chairs was once alive and may look like it still, but we know better. But if something is dead, then what about all the atoms and particles that were part of it? Are they now dead too? A lot of unanswered questions still, but it's a good start. Now let's take a look how life began in the universe and how did we get here. Before the 1800s, people believed in something called vitalism. Now, it's an idea that all living things possess inside them some magical property that makes them separate from the inanimate objects. The Bible says that it was God who used the breath of life to animate first humans, and our immortal soul is a form of vitalism. So far we haven't found such magical chemical which clearly separates us from the rest of the matter. Then 1859 waltzed along a guy called Charles Darwin with his theory and his book called On the Origins of Species, and threw God out the window. Darwin knew that it was a profound question. And what if life began in a small body of water filled with simple organic compounds which bathed in sunlight? And the idea that living organisms formed by purely chemical means without God or even a mystical life force was pretty radical and a slap to the face of Christians. In 1953, a study was published which is now called Miller-Urey experiment, where two scientists, Harold Urey and Stanley Miller, created an environment in glass tubes as Earth would have been billions of years ago, with boiling water, hydrogen gas, ammonia and methane. By the end of the week, the water in the glass tube was deep red and cloudy. Analyzing the mixture, Miller found two amino acids, glycine and alanine, often described as the building blocks of life, so making two life's most important components from scratch. Of course, life is more complex than just two amino acids, and Earth's atmosphere back then contained lots more other different gases and chemicals, and a healthy dose of chaos. The universe started out as a massive ball of simple chaos. The electromagnetism and gravity appeared. Then onwards, more and more complex things started to happen. First matter forms, subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, hydrogen and helium atoms. In this very simple universe where only clouds of hydrogen and helium atoms floated, gravity started pulling them together to form stars. Stars are very, very, very important to life. Life in average favors balance, as I pointed out in many of my videos. Now stars, they create Goldilocks zones. Goldilocks zone is a habitable zone around the star where it's not too hot and not too cold. And it comes from the old fairy tale called Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where the little girl went into the bear's house to try out different foods. One was too cold, one was too hot, but one was really good. The bed was big, bed was small, but one was soft and right enough for that. So that's where the Goldilocks thing comes from. So when a planet like our Earth happens to get on the orbit in that zone, it has a good opportunity for the magic to take place. Joni Mitchell famously sang "We Are Stardust" in her song Woodstock. Stars are like nuclear reactors. They take fuel and they convert it into something else. Hydrogen is formed into helium, and helium is built into carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and iron and sulfur. And now when these stars die, they can go supernova, which pushes all that life-forming stuff out into the universe. And that created our bodies. So she was right, we are made of dust of dying stars. So on our planet, which was also made thanks to the dying stars 4.6 billion years ago, we have liquids, we have water. And water is also super important to life, because life needs balance. You see, there are little particles flying all around us, all the time. Atoms, molecules, and in hot gaseous forms, they fly too fast, they cannot interact with each other. In solid stone forms, they're just sitting idly by. But in liquids, in water, they can cruise around, they can say hi to each other, the neighbors, they can cuddle, and they can form bonds, they can form molecules, different types of molecules. And in our primal oceans, fantastic chemistry began to happen, where atoms began to hang out in all sorts of exotic combinations. And here comes into play the famous molecule of all, DNA. DNA is a template for life. It is a string of information, an information of how to make living organisms. And DNA can replicate itself, and when it does that many times over, it changes, it adapts, and some new forms can come into existence. At first, life forms were very simple, single-celled organisms, and to this day they are still all around us. Then life began to become more complex and we have multi-celled organisms. And it took forever to get to this point, because DNA is a slow learner. It takes forever for it to evolve through random events and happy accidents.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
And billions of years later, here we are. But why should you care about all of this? Thanks to our big brains, we no longer need to wait for evolution. We can utilize humanity's greatest invention, language. Through language and information, we can now create our own reality. Through tools like CRISPR, we can manipulate the DNA to cure HIV or eliminate cancer growing genes and make better humans or create the world-ending doom marines. Our collective knowledge will help us build artificial intelligences that could skyrocket our understanding of life forms to unknown heights, or again, apocalyptically, wipe us back to the Big Bang era. I hope you're a good God. So here are my thoughts. Life is a period between birth and death. We might have happened to be here by some mathematical random chance or by some intelligent plan, or we might be energy and information flowing from one form to another. Science has mapped out the random sequence of events that made life possible up to the point where Big Bang or some such happened, but it's still only just a very good hypothesis. But what caused it all? What's the point? Are we just a random noise of static that formed a momentary pattern where existence and life is meaningless and then it's over? That can cause existential dread and depression, and I urge you keep those thoughts out. Those thoughts benefit nobody. But what about the information that keeps evolving, like some organism? Like the universe has a brain? Well, that's a fun thought. If there is some master plan or God's breath soul thingy, then magic and dragons and Jedi can exist, no? From our day-to-day, we don't think about life, but we ought to. When I was a little kid, I was in awe of this world. When I was a bit bigger and I knew a bit more, my amazement grew. When I look at my baby girl, I want to give her the whole fantastical world. And I want my friends and my viewers to see that this life is a blessing and a gift. If it is all just a random happy accident, then you being here is almost an impossibility. While you are here, explore, learn, love, enjoy, get hurt, and then get well. Take life seriously, but then have times where you don't take it seriously at all. The older we get, the more we regret the things that we haven't tried than the things we have tried. If you feel stuck or depressed, embrace it. But know that there exists the other side of the spectrum as well. And you can get there if you focus on the feeling. If the mystical theories of souls and reincarnations and ebbs and flows of the universe happen to be true, it does not matter. The end point is the same. You are here and you have limitless potential. Don't waste your life. Don't waste this chance. Collect more memories that make you feel good inside than the bad ones. But do remember that the bad ones also make the good ones more sweeter. My child was planned and I waited a long time for her, and I want to give all my love to her. Yes, that means that my free time might be a little bit crunched right now and my weekly video schedule might suffer for it, but it's fine. Her needs comes first and the time passes by so quickly and I don't want to miss it. She teaches me a lot of things like patience, for example, and I will come out better for it. Every day for us new parents, life is an exploration and an exercise in letting life happen. I am definitely playing on a hardcore difficulty right now and making videos is a bit harder, but I will definitely keep making them because it's a good challenge for me as well. And I do intend to maintain a certain level of quality to them. I don't want to push videos out just for video's sake. And so here, your comments and likes and subscriptions make it so much sweeter for me. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something new today and try to stop every once in a while and marvel at the complexity of life. Keep learning and keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next one.